Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Rich Guggenheim to talk about Protect Kids Colorado. Protect Kids Colorado is a broad coalition of parents, grandparents, and concerned citizens coming together to protect kids and strengthen families in Colorado. Well, Rich, I hope you are well today, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, Rich, how did you get involved with Protect Kids Colorado?
Well, I would say this was one of those things where Greg Lopez, now Congressman Lopez, had gotten my name from some people who heard about what I do with Gays Against Groomers. And he had approached me about these initiatives. And so we met and we sat down at lunch and I was given the language of these two initiatives. And I immediately knew that this was something I had to do. I joke with Greg about this because he told me I'd only have to go down to the title board once and we would get title to these, and then the rest of it would be pretty easy. For for those, we can talk a little bit more about that process maybe later, but that was definitely not the case. We spent a lot of time on it, but I don't look at that as a bad thing. It was definitely a learning experience. And it was full of challenges, but at the end of the day, I believe deeply in the cause of what we're fighting for. And so I've been committed to it the entire time.
Awesome. So maybe just briefly, before we get to into the kind of the discussion about these initiatives, can you maybe describe what that process is like for people who want to get something on the ballot?
I can. So the process is really convoluted. It sounds straightforward. It is a citizens initiative process and it is constitutionally protected in the state of Colorado. But um, with our current state of affairs in Colorado and with the current Secretary of State, the process is not quite as straightforward. And we filed the language. And for those who are unaware of what this all entails, the title board is a part of the Secretary of State that is a tribunal, three people, one representing the Secretary of State's office, one representing the Attorney General's office, and one representing the Office of Legislative Legal Services. And their sole responsibility, their statutory authority as given to them in the Constitution of the state of Colorado, is to determine one thing, and that is if the ballot initiative meets the single subject requirement. It's the same with our legislation. Legislation and ballot initiatives have a single subject requirement under the Constitution as well. That's all they're supposed to do. But we could see pretty obvious political bias from the very onset of this. And we would go before the title board and they would give us titles stating that it had met the single subject requirement. And we found the challenge to be coming from an individual named Mark Gruskin. And anybody who's ever read the book, The Blueprint for Colorado, will know that name really well. He's ranked as one of Colorado's most powerful attorneys, and he was hired to represent One Colorado, an LGBTQ plus organization that does advocacy and policy work. I would go so far as to say they are mostly a TQIA plus organization. They really don't represent the interests of the LGB folks anymore. And they challenged us every single step of the way. So we would have a rehearing on our initiatives, and that usually turned the result over, where they would deny title to this, even though subsequently they had found that it was single subject. And so we would have to go back and refine the language and refile it. And the process starts at the Capitol building with Office of Legislative Legal Services. And they ask you, what is your single subject? And so we go through that process and then they send it over to the Secretary of State's office where you start the process over again. And then we had to file it. We were there probably half a dozen times just for 160 alone, and then 142 there was multiple versions of that went through probably about 20 or 30 iterations of it. And it's very time consuming. And the closer you get to the election and when they have to do the cutoff, the more they have on the agenda. So you sometimes think you're going to show up on Wednesdays because they only meet every other Wednesday, and then you wind up showing up on Thursday because the agenda bleeds over to the next day. And so, it's days off of work, days away from your family, days spent sitting in that room. And at one point, in fact, that is actually the 160 version that we see with our language. Brandy Bradley, Representative Bradley, had written the language for it. I believe it was HB 23-1089. Again, single subject requirement for any legislation. So Office of Legislative Legal had already found that our language met the single subject requirement. And we had met so much opposition, we packed that room with a bunch of female athletes and their children, and Representative Bradley and a bunch, I'm talking like the International Women's Forum, the Women's Liberation Front, Olympic class female athletes came to this hearing and testified at this hearing. You could tell that the chairwoman of Teresa Conley of the title board, she was really upset with us that we had done that. So she wound up screaming at us essentially. And then Representative Bradley testified on it. And we had some fun times with that one. The room was packed and people recording it, and she was trying to say that she wasn't sure that we are allowed to record, and I said this is a public meeting and we are allowed to record. So it eventually, that was the one that made it through the rehearing process and then wound up being challenged by Mark Gruskin to the Colorado Supreme Court. And the Colorado Supreme Court found that it met single subject. Of course, this is a very time-consuming process, and we're already up against the clock, so that window for us to be able to gather signatures is closing with each passing day. And at the end of that, when the Colorado Supreme Court gave us they cleared it, they said it met single subject, then we were able to finally print the petitions. But by this time, we had run down to almost 90 days, from 6 months to 90 days to be able to gather the required number of signatures. And I think that's part of the tactic of Mark Gruskin and One Colorado, is to just simply run out the clock. But we got it, and we have not received a single penny from any public. It's all grassroots, all small donors, all volunteer. So it's been great. I think we've met some fantastic people. We've had some fantastic volunteers, and it's been an opportunity to meet. I've been to every single one of Colorado's counties during this process, talking to people. And I will tell you, this is not a far right issue. This is not a far left issue. This is a common sense issue. And in fact, if you start looking at the people who have really championed this, people like Erin Friday out of California, she is a liberal. The Women's Liberation Front are mostly progressive women who have stood beside us on this issue. I've had Democrats, libertarians, unaffiliated, Republicans, every religion that I can think of has come to the table on this. I've had a lot of gay and lesbian people say that they support this. I've had just every race, religion. This, I think, is an issue that transcends politics, because our children are what we're fighting for.
Wow. Yeah, I really appreciate you providing some of that context, some of that background on the ballot initiative process, because I think a lot of people assume that it's very easy to get something on the ballot, or assume that there's not going to be some challenges. It's interesting to see that there's so much pushback in the tactics and how the other side can really delay that process and limit the ability to collect those signatures. I mean, that's really interesting. I don't think people talk about that enough.
One of the other the thing that you really think about, if you understand, our opposition has money. They've already raised close to $500,000. It's One Colorado, the Rose Foundation, out Boulder County. They're bringing in out-of-state money to try and defeat these. The Colorado Educators Association, the Colorado PTA are opposed to these initiatives. And so they've raised all this money to fight it. And we don't have that money. This is purely grassroots efforts. And they've tried to stop us from the very start. And I think that one of the things that they're afraid of with the fact that they have raised this money is they see that this is something that could very well pass if it gets onto the ballot. And I think they know that if it gets onto the ballot, it will pass. And I think that's why they've tried to stop us from even getting this far. And when you have that kind of money and you have powerful attorneys trying to shut down citizens of Colorado from simply bringing their voice into the public square, I think that is very antithetical to any kind of democratic process. It is antithetical to free speech, and it is un-American what they are doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. People love to chime about democracy and how wonderful it is and what a wonderful sacred institution our democracy is. But the reality is, if it threatens your power, then they usually don't like it. So
And
always
that right
very,
there,
yeah,
it's
go ahead.
fascism. They are literally the ones that are engaging in fascism by trying to silence the speech of people they don't agree with.
Right. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there that if these do get on the ballot, a lot of people in Colorado are going to support it. It's a nonpartisan, really non-denominational issue, I guess, for lack of a better word, but kind of something that people from all backgrounds could support because it's kids. It's in the name, Protect Kids Colorado. So let's get into it here with the actual initiatives. So there are two initiatives that you're trying to get on the ballot in Colorado. Let's talk about the first one. Parental notification of gender incongruence. What is that?
So right now, for those who aren't aware, children in Colorado in school, thanks to our reproductive Bill of Rights, and also this last legislative session when they passed 1039 and 1071 and a host of other bills, they really provide children with wraparound services for gender affirming care. And so a child in school now is being told that we will affirm your name under 1039. And the problem with that, a lot of people don't understand, is this social acceptance of a new name or a new gender identity. 97.5%, and this is research that we have that backs this up, peer-reviewed scientific research. 97.5% of youth who are allowed to socially transition, meaning their name and their pronouns are affirmed, will go on to medically transition. And in Colorado, a child over the age of 16 can receive those services without parental notification or parental consent. And so this really is about ensuring that a parent has the tools that they need to guide their child through some of the most difficult times in their life, and that is puberty. And if a child has disclosed any kind of distress or discomfort over their body or their gender or their sex or any of that kind of stuff, it is up to the parents to lovingly guide and nurture their child through that time. And one of the false narratives, the gaslighting that you'll hear from the left, is that, well, we have to do this because if a child came out to their parents or their parents found out, then their parents would abuse them. And I push back on that very hard because, first of all, these teachers are mandated reporters. So if that is already happening, which they're saying it is, and that's why we need to be keeping these secrets from parents, if this is already happening, why aren't the teachers reporting this as mandated reporters? So if these teachers are failing in their job as mandated reporters, fire the teacher. But let's just say they are reporting it. Where's the data? There's no data to back this up. And the reason there's no data to back this up is because it is an unfounded lie that they are using to stoke the fires of fear to get people to oppose these initiatives. So this
Wow.
really comes back to, if we understand what gender ideology's ultimate goal is, it is the destruction of sex as a noun and sex-based rights. And when you erase sex and sex-based rights, you're undermining the very foundation of society. And the way they seek to go about this is to destroy the trust that should exist between a parent and their child and the parent and their teachers. And so that's why I really believe in this, because without that trust, that's where we see the very foundation of our society crumble.
Wow, yeah. I think people might not necessarily realize the stakes with this type of situation that we're facing in our society right now in terms of the destruction of the family, the destruction of sex, as you said, as a noun. This idea that, individuals don't really have a foundational identity and that it can be manipulated and changed over time. I mean, it's shocking to think we're even at this point. And I think it's one of those things where I think a lot of people don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe that. They say, "Oh no, this is just to protect these kids. This is just to do this." When for the people who are supporting, the trans stuff for children, it's to help these kids out, but they don't realize these other implications of what this means to a civilization, right?
Right. And it's hard to talk about. In fact, Kara Dansky wrote some books about this. One of her books is The Abolition of Sex. And she even addresses the fact that what we say sounds so outlandish to the average person that a lot of people just think, oh, well, go put on your tinfoil hat, right? So they're really, it is a difficult thing because a lot of people just are like, well, you just sound like you're talking about conspiracy theories, but this really is about abolition of sex-based rights, and the abolition of our society that is built on the understanding that there are two sexes, male and female, and that it isn't something that you feel. It is a biological statement of fact.
Yeah, it is shocking. It's something where people don't want to necessarily accept it that it's a real thing that they might have to do something about. So appreciate you and everybody else's efforts getting this on the ballot, trying to get parents notified if their child at school is having these incongruence issues, having some thoughts. I believe is it so if this passes, if it gets on the ballot and people vote for it here in Colorado, it would mean that if a student at a school has some sort of expresses some sort of thoughts or ideas about this gender incongruence, then the teachers or the school staff would have is it 72 hours to get that information back to the parents?
48.
48 hours, oh, even better.
Yep.
So I mean, that's huge, because you got to think, these parents, they spend all these years, 12 years, 16 years raising their children, taking care of them, doing everything possible for them. And then these teachers and these activists come in and say, well, hey, wait a second, maybe you don't need the parents anymore. Maybe you can kind of just go along with what we have to say. And we don't really want to talk to your parents about what you're talking about. We'll talk to you about these ideas instead. And then, these poor kids can kind of get sucked into a bad place.
Yeah, and it's completely, in my opinion, it's inappropriate for these so-called trusted adults to be talking to your child about anything sexual without your knowledge and consent behind your back.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so obvious, right? It seems so obvious that teachers, school staff, any of these other quote unquote trusted adults, it's not appropriate for them to be having these conversations and to talk to them about, sexual matters. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that we're even at this point.
Yeah. And the fact that we are, and if you look at AB 1955 in California, and Elon Musk has been all over this on Twitter, this is the exact same thing that we are trying to prevent from coming to Colorado with this ballot initiative.
Right? Because if things can go too far where they say, hey, your kid is not safe in the family's household, maybe we need to remove the child from the household because they're not going to conform with their new gender identity, and it gives an excuse to pull these kids away from their families to disempower parents. Really, I mean, it's shocking and terrific what's happening in California. We definitely can't allow that to happen here.
And we've already laid the foundation for that to happen here in Colorado with HB 1017 that passed last year. It's the Foster Children's Bill of Rights. And so in Colorado, if a parent does not affirm a child's preferred name or gender identity, that now with some of the civil rights stuff that they passed, I believe it was Senate Bill 89 last session, making gender identity a protected class, and a hate crime now in Colorado to misgender or dead name an individual. The parent can then have the child removed. The child will be placed into state care, and under this 1017, children will be able to receive gender affirming care services paid for by the taxpayers without parental consent.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's bad news for sure. So people, if this makes it on the ballot, this parental notification of gender incongruence, definitely something that people should consider supporting to protect families, to protect kids, and try and slow down this this train speeding off the cliff here.
Yes. So yeah, I really encourage people to look up Protect Kids Colorado and see what this is about and see through the smoke and the mirrors that our opposition is trying to make this out to be. It is not anything transphobic. This is simply about compassion for children and ensuring that those relationships of trust between a child and their parent and a child in the school are maintained.
Well said. Well said. So, Rich, the second initiative is keep boys out of girls' sports. What can you tell us about this one?
Yep, this is another initiative, Initiative 160, like I alluded to earlier. This was Representative Bradley's bill from 2 years ago, and we took the same language. And this simply ensures that girls have a safe, fair place to compete. At the end of the day, equality and inclusion are the foundation of these bills, of this initiative, and it ensures, like I said, girls are safe in the locker room, girls are safe on the field. And I find it so ironic that we have gotten so much pushback from this because the people pushing back from this are the ones that are going to tell you consent is sexy. And they're going to say to the women, you have the right to say no to a man in the bedroom, but you don't have the right to say no to a man on the field. And that's what this is about. And this is, at its face value, this is about ensuring that girls are safe and they can play in a fair and compete in a fair manner on the field. And where this leads is when women and girls are denied that opportunity in athletics to compete against other girls. This is not just about sports, but if you have a team of 12 girls and you tell one of those girls you are no longer good enough to be on this team and you must now give up your spot on this team to a man who feels like a woman, that's discrimination. And that is demoralizing to that girl, and it is demoralizing to the other girls on that team. But beyond the social emotional piece that you're destroying, that psychological damage and harm that you do to girls by allowing men on the team to take their place, it also robs girls of the opportunity to earn scholarships, public recognition, which is often needed for those scholarships, and the opportunity to go to college. And so you're depriving girls of the opportunity to go to college, gain an education, and advance in their careers. So we're locking girls back into the same sexist cages that they were in before things like Title IX came along. And so this has a lot more implications than just equality for transgender individuals on a team. There's also a biological difference between a man and a woman. And I think anybody in with two eyes that can see understand that men are larger and they produce testosterone. They have bigger, denser musculature system, bone system, larger heart capacity, larger lung capacity. So all of these things translate into something that is a physiological advantage that no amount of training is going to be able to make a woman go up against. And so it's just unfair, it's discriminatory, and it's wrong.
I just can't even imagine what some of these poor girls could be going through in high school, for example. Tough times for a lot of people, as you kind of alluded to earlier, and then to be told that you can't be on the sports team, they're going to give it to somebody who is a boy, who's wants to be a girl. You get kicked out of the sports team. I mean, what would that do to somebody? I mean, it's absolutely horrible, and yeah, I mean, it's just not fair. It's not right. It's immoral. It's so wrong on so many levels. And then, of course, to tell these other girls on the team that they just got to go along with it. They just got to accept it. Then now there's a guy on their team, and maybe he's in the locker room with them. Maybe he's on the alone time with them. Overnight trips some places. I mean, it'd have to be really demoralizing, really shocking, and possibly very horrific for some of these girls athletes.
Yes, and at the end of the day, if we want to talk about fairness, if we want to talk about equality, if we want to talk about inclusion, that is the foundation of what this is about. This is about making sure that same-sex spaces are protected. This is about ensuring that those girls and these women have fought for decades to have the right to do certain things, whether it's the right to vote, whether, the other day when I was back in Michigan, I talked to two older ladies who said that they could not open a bank account without their husband's consent. And this was back in the 70s. And we've come a long way for women's equality only to undo all of that work under the guise of inclusion. And so we have to stand up and we have to protect women's rights. And that starts with ensuring that girls have a safe, fair place to compete.
Yeah, very important and foundational to the lives of so many of these young women. So let's hope this gets through. And this one, I feel like it's going to be really hard for people to say no. I mean, there's just this idea of keep boys out of girls' sports. I think maybe not publicly, but people even on the left or the other side of it might support this in an anonymous ballot. Maybe they're not vocally talking about it on social media, but they see what's going on, maybe are a little uneasy with it, and maybe go ahead and vote to support something like this, knowing that it's not going to be broadcast to the world because they see all the implications behind it.
Exactly. And I think a lot of us understand because most of us in this world, we either have a mom or a daughter or a granddaughter or something, some female, some woman in our life that has had to compete in their in this is something we can all relate to. And I think that's why it's something that resonates with so many of us. And there's a lot of people alive who remember pre-Title IX days. And so this really ensures that we protect the rights of women.
A simple statement, and I think most people would get behind that. So we're in the final process here. Signatures are wrapping. The collection process for signatures is wrapping up. Everything will be submitted to the Secretary of State's office. Then they'll cure those signatures, see how many of them count, how many are legible, how many they it can match up with actual registered voters in Colorado, and then the decision will come out if there's enough signatures to get these on the ballot. Rich, what's your thinking on this? Do you have enough signatures to get these on the ballot?
I think we do. And people ask me that, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know. I don't know what the Secretary of State's office will do and how much scrutiny these signatures will receive. I don't know. I can't say that I believe it will be a fair process, but I can tell you this. If we make ballot, this is the starting gate because now we have until November to hit the road, hit the campaign trail, and make people aware of the initiatives and what's at stake here. And so what we've been doing up until this point really is just priming the pump. This has been warming up and getting ready for, quite frankly, what is a sprint to the finish line. And so I hope we'll make ballot. I think we're going to make ballot. I know we're going to have a lot of opposition. They're already bringing in tons of out-of-state money. Special interests and dark money are trying to stop these under the guise of trans inclusivity. But I believe that the average Colorado voter is smart enough to see through that. I also believe that if for some reason we don't make ballot, I we're not going to stop fighting. This is not the final show. This is the rehearsal. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep getting we're Protect Kids Colorado is going to keep introducing legislation and we're going to keep introducing ballot measures to protect children. So we're not going anywhere. I think that if we don't make ballot, one of the things we'll be able to go back to our donors and say, look, we faced all of this opposition. We had a compressed time frame to gather signatures. We still fired up a base. We built a network. We got these volunteers out there and look at all that we accomplished in such a short period of time. I also believe that this is $500,000 that I'm aware of so far that the opposition is not able to spend mutilating children. So that's a great thing. And this has also been an opportunity as people have been out traveling across the state of Colorado talking about these two initiatives. it's created a conversation and an awareness that did not exist previously. So
Yeah.
I feel optimistic no matter which way this goes.
I'm right there with you. I am optimistic about the future of this issue. I think, people do not want to see kids making these life-altering permanent decisions when they're so young. I think the majority of people realize that that's not a good idea. And of course, protecting girls' sports and women's rights is a winning issue ultimately. So I think the future is bright. I think it's interesting to see though this organized machine with so much money behind it. Uh, being built up over the years and coming out fighting against these initiatives and other types of issues here in Colorado. So it'll be very interesting to see how the voters respond, how the grassroots, how just people in communities, if they're going to be able to push back against this massive out of state money and all this narrative that the media's and other organizations are going to create to try and really demonize this Protect Kids Colorado initiative. So really interesting to see. Look forward to talking to you again. Any final words here, Rich?
No, I just want to say to everybody, kind of before I go, those that have supported this, that have helped out, I am so humbled by the support and the help and the involvement of so many people. um, I can't express my gratitude enough. It feels sometimes pretty lonely when you're in that Secretary of State's office by yourself. But when you finally get out and you're seeing the number of people who are behind you, it is a very um, heartwarming and emotional experience. So I truly appreciate everybody that supported this. If you have not yet signed the petitions or you want to know how you can get involved, please go to protectkidscolorado.org's website. We're in the final push of this. And like I said, we aren't going anywhere. So keep in touch, follow us on social media, and please hit that donate button because, like I said, this is grassroots and we're up against the machine. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rich. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you for all your hard work on this and other projects that you're involved in, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
yeah, thank you.